Hi, Eugene. Hi, Sophie.
What's up?
What's up?
Hello.
Hi. Hey, thanks for joining me today. Right. And I know it's been a long time since we've actually seen each other face to face. Right. And really missing the AR runs that I used to see you guys at. Yeah. So um, let's jump straight into the session, right? Maybe we could start off by you telling us a little bit more about yourselves, right? I know you guys are owners, you founders, you started Studio 155, that's your own agency. And I know you guys also started the High Panthers and also Adidas Runners. So it's a lot of community that you guys are doing. So really excited to speak to you about this today. So please uh, do share a little bit more.
So I'll touch on those three. So the Studio 5 is the company that does a lot of creative conceptualization, a lot of marketing. That was actually started by Sophie and her partner. She's my Lao Panyang for that. Uh, for High Panthers, I co-founded it with two other guys about 8 years ago, and that's a charity running crew. And for Adidas Runners, that was something that is a global initiative by Adidas. So in every city, or not every 60, I think 62 or 63 cities around the world is an Adidas Runners community. And when it first started here, the High Panthers was one of the running crews that formed the nucleus of the group that started lah.
And with all of this community building that you've been working on, right? I mean, High Panthers was 8 years ago. How did this idea come about in the first place?
High Panthers.
Yeah.
High, the High Panthers one, the story a bit chapalang, not so cool. So actually, when we first started, it was basically three of us. We used to play rugby in school together, and we had signed up for Men's Health Urban Athlon. This was back then lah. And we're gonna take part, and then we were like, you know what, let's do something so that we can raise funds for charities since we're gonna be doing this thing anyway. It was very casual, very organic, and then we at the same time also we the first charity we raised funds for was the World Toilet Organization. Very weird, very strange. Since then, it's always been our ethos to try to help communities that are not so much in the media spotlight. So at the time, why World Toilet Organization? Because for a few reasons, but for me personally, it was because I just come back from a backpacking trip in India a couple of years back, and I saw the state of sanitation. I saw the state of water. I turn on the tap to go and shower, the water come out brown. Like toilet, like urinal facilities are open, and in the bus stations whereby the pee is just leaking out. Like it's all these things, and so that we decided we wanted to help them. The name the High Panthers came about also not so cool, not like the cat, like the black panther. A lot of people think we are. It's actually like high pants.
Oh.
Uh, yeah, and the reason for that is because when three of us played rugby in school, there's one day after school we were mucking around, and we were doing the haka, like the New Zealand haka, and we put our shots very high lah to go and do the haka. There's actually a photo of it on Facebook somewhere. And there's a professional rugby team called the Otago Highlanders. So we were just mucking around with it back then. We called ourselves the High, like we said, we were the High Panthers. And then when we decided to form this running group, we like the name just came quite naturally. So since we first started, then we didn't really know what we were doing. We just kind of like rolled with it year on year, trying to find different charities to support organically. And then a few years back, I found out that we knew we were different with traditional running clubs. The way we operated, and we knew there was something different, but we didn't know what it was. And then a few years back, we got together with the AR community, and we also started meeting running crews from around the world. And we realized, hang on a minute, there are these other running groups out there around the world that are a lot more lifestyle focused, a lot more community driven. And these movements started globally around 2005 to 2008, somewhere there in the US and in Europe. We didn't know about it then, and mostly started by creatives around the world. So yeah lah. So I guess in this sense, what is also interesting about us is that like the global run crew culture is this very like cool background to it. Ours was a bit not so cool, but somehow it just all kind of came together quite nicely. I guess that's something that community does also. And yeah, if you look at the all the run crew logos around the world, it's always quite cool. And there's like some cool lightning or the feet with like wings on it. Then of course this guy with the balloon and the high pants is like simi taiji. But yeah, I guess that's partly what community is about. Like it brings like-minded people together, no
But has it
matter.
has it always been called community even from 8 years ago? Because this community buzzword, right, only in recent maybe 3 or 5 years has been like overused, right? Buzz, buzz, buzz,
Yeah.
buzz, buzz. But when you started High Panthers, was the term or the word community already in use? And do you think it's the same understanding as what people had 8 years ago compared to today?
So when we first started it, we had a very clear idea. I mean, I don't know whether the word community was a buzzword that we used, but it was very clear. I mean, recently I just changed the Facebook copy because it was a bit outdated, but it was very clear that, okay, one of my original logos I wanted to do was of this guy running and actually carrying like a beer mug and something else. I can't remember what the other thing he was carrying. And it was to, basically our idea was like, hey, we want to run, we want to get people to come together, raise money for charity, and then after we run, we sit down and have a beer, right? And that was how it really started, the
Mm.
idea of it. I mean, don't ask me why beer, I really don't know. And so that's why when we had this logo, the idea for the guy to be carrying this heart balloon was very important because we wanted to show that the humanity side for it. And I think also when one of our earliest like running singlets, we had a line there that says like each step for humanity. So the idea of people and I guess like you said, community has always been there, maybe not intentionally to use that word, but from day one for when we first founded it, we knew that was a direction that we were heading towards.
And would you say that the High Panthers community is a subset of the AR community, or how would you define each community to be the same or different?
Completely different. Well, different is a bit tricky because of the hats that Soph and I both wear.
Mm.
So yeah, THP has been around for longer, but at the same time, the values, not values lah, but the goals of each one, while both are very driven to build community, and so there's obviously some overlap, but the agendas might also be a bit different. So obviously, one of the biggest differences would be that AR is brand led and THP is not. There's obviously going to always be different pros and cons and different things you have to maneuver around for those things. But yeah, so when AR first started here, the creators like Adidas creators, and as an extension of that, because of what Soph and I do with THP itself also formed a base nucleus for AR when it first started lah.
Mm. Mm. And maybe you can share a little bit about the challenges that you had building or starting out the AR community to start with. But I guess it's a bit not so difficult because it is a global brand to begin with, right? So, but then still, I guess there was probably some. I mean, I was there from day one, right? In the first sessions that you guys had, and it was already gaining quite a lot of traction. But in terms of the building of that community, what do you think was what were the challenges that you faced? Yeah. Hey, Sophie, sorry, can I just maybe you can move a little bit closer to you?
She's running further and further away.
Yeah. Don't be so scared of her.
She's trying to go closer to the fan. The fan is on the right side, so she keeps moving closer and closer to the fan. The two of us like very draw, right? You see the two of us, then she's like very cool, she keep moving there. I think Sophie should answer this one because when AR first started, I was still based in Bangkok.
Mm.
Yeah.
So she'll be more clear on this one.
I remember when we first started, it was like less than 10 of us.
Mm.
I don't know, were you around for those few first
Yeah,
few
yeah,
sessions?
yeah. I think I was. Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point in time, it was also a situation where I guess Adidas Singapore said like, oh, we're going to do this thing. We're going to set up this run club, and yeah, we want you guys to help to like start it, and obviously, I think for me at that point in time, I really didn't have any clue what I was stepping into as well. I mean, it's Adidas is a huge brand, and being part of something like that obviously came with a lot of responsibility and I guess also anticipation and also a bit of like fear because you really don't know what this is going to go into. I mean, it eventually grew to like we're having runs with like more than 100 people, right, each time, which is crazy think about it when we started out with 10. So challenges wise, I think we've kind of like also, I mean, very, very simple things like do we do like a weekly run? Do we do a bi-weekly run? I think overseas, different countries and different cities for AR had different formats, right, of what they were doing. When eventually I travel and you travel and we met other AR captains and other AR runners, we realized how the formats were so different in every country. I think it was also kind of figuring out what would work locally for us. Though this one wasn't really so much our challenge, but I think the brand's challenge in that sense. So I think figuring out the format, figuring out how to put out the communication, how would you attract people to come and run? Because I mean, at the point in time when it started 3 years ago, right? Yeah, I think actually no, it will be 4 years already by October, right? I can't remember the anniversary of 3 years. Yeah, so this year is 4th year.
2017
Yeah,
so now it's
17, 18, 19, 20, 4th year. Yeah, this year is the 4th year. Then also,
I thought it's 3. Last year was 2. We are 2. This year is 3.
No, this year 3.
Because 17, 18, 19, 20. 3 years.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, 3 years. But yeah, now I lost my train of thought when I was trying to calculate the number of years. What was I saying?
You
I
were
forget now.
You were talking about how it has grown from 10 to 100, right? And learning from the people that you met, the runners as well as the creators from overseas. Yeah, so not sure if that reminds you.
Yeah, they're saying that when you go overseas, you see other people, what they do.
And then, I mean, when we came back, we gave that feedback to the team locally, and then we tried to see whether, there were ways that we could kind of like improve how we were doing things locally to engage the community a lot more. So I think in that sense, it has been quite a journey to where we are today for AR. Yeah.
And how, at which points, what was the sort of feedback that you were getting, or how were you getting feedback to make sure that you were giving the community what they wanted? I mean, yes, the brand Adidas wants something, but if the brand Adidas wants something, but the people don't want it or don't need it, then there's stuck match, right? So what were the ways, for you to be actually engaging with the community to get the intelligence?
I think on ground, we spent quite a bit of time. I mean, for me, because I'm generally not a fast runner, I still am not. So I would spend the time when I'm doing the runs to talk to different people and get the feedback on ground. Sometimes they actually message us privately as well through our social media. Most times, people that want to join feel very intimidated by the community. I think mainly because of the brand perception and how it's been positioned. It's not a bad thing because obviously it comes with a certain, I want to join this community because of how I perceive it to be. But I think the intimidation part is quite real for many people, because they would ask like, oh, must I be able to run a certain pace, or what if I can't run but I want to come, that kind of questions, which are very real. Yeah, I think mainly would be on ground and via my own socials. I don't know about you. Same, right? I would think so. Yeah.
And I think that slight exclusivity where you actually have to ballot for a spot, right? That one does create that slight
FOMO.
Yeah.
Right?
That feeling, right? So in a way, yes, it's good. In a way, it's bad, because some people might be put off, right, by the fact that hey, why are they being so exclusive? Shouldn't they be all inclusive, right? So, but I understand from a ops perspective, that's the way to do it. Otherwise, if you can't manage the number of people coming in, then you can't manage the logistics, right, for things like that.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I've also learned over these years, and more and more so, is also the fact that when we talk about community, we talk about so there's important distinction here. Community does not equate to everybody. I think that when we use the word community, like you say, it's such a buzzword now, right? Everyone uses it. And we often think, okay, that's what community is. And I've come to realize that actually community doesn't mean everybody. A community, you have to kind of identify who and what this community is, and then you build that community. And you kind of need to, if you don't have a clear idea as to what this how you define this community, then it gets a bit hard, because at the end of the day, that's life, right? You can't please everybody. So to answer your question, you're asking us now, how do you make sure that you know what the brand wants and what people want? I think that the short answer there is, we can listen, but at the end of the day, we can't please everyone. And there's, in this case, if it's a brand, for example, with AR, if it's a brand-led initiative, then obviously there are certain agendas that's pushed by the brand. And if there are certain, basically the community needs to subscribe to those agendas and beliefs. Whereas if you are trying to then subscribe to everybody's agendas and beliefs, you will never be able to build that community that you're trying to build, because you're trying to reach out to too many people, right? There's always going to be somebody who's not happy with something. So yeah, I think that's the other side of it, which as much as we listen and take on board, at the end of the day, you also need to be quite rooted and revisit what the agenda is. And trying and making sure you adhere and stick to it, while obviously being open to listening to input lah. Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about the High Panthers, right? Again, do you think that High Panthers today is any different from High Panthers when you started it 8 years ago, in terms of as the vision or the values, in terms of the alignment, right? You mentioned like-minded people coming together as this community.
It's interesting because when we first started it, it was very simplistic. Like I said, it was very much like just three of us, and we're like, hey, let's just do this thing. We just know that we want to get people on board. And then, whoever wants to come and join us, just join us. And then over the years, it started growing. And then as with anything else, when you have more people coming on board, you get more opinions and more interest, and some different people have different things that they want to look out for, some for themselves, some for others. At the end of the day, I always feel there's no right or wrong to it. I think that it's just different people, different genders. So obviously, you kind of tend to have to evolve over time, and you learn. I think it's a learning curve for everyone. The most important takeaway is that you actually do learn from it and adapt. And for the High Panthers itself, the main focus and the main goal since day one has not been any different. Even if, at the end of the day, even if we somehow phrase it a bit differently or a bit unsure along the way, I think now revisiting it, when you asked me the question just now, when we first started, what did we want to do? And I break it down to, actually, was it really community? I don't think so. The word wasn't the buzzword, but we break it down to something so simple that, hey, let's get people together who want to work out, do some good, and let's chill, have a good time together. That's a common goal. It's a common agenda. And in that sense, then I would say that has not changed since day one.
And would you say that you applied stuff from there in how you manage the High Panthers to how you actually started or got things running with AR?
Yep, I would say both ways. It goes both ways. We're constantly learning from and trying to apply the lessons we learned from both sides. And we try to push the boundaries on both sides with that. We try to give ideas that we learn from other people, either other AR communities or other independent run crews that we meet around the world. And obviously with the stuff that we do, also our work is quite creative based. So a lot of things that we see, we try to apply also. So we are trying to apply on both sides. Sometimes obviously with, like I say, with AR is brand led, so then there's certain agendas and certain more hoops to jump through. So then that's where whether it can be done or not. And then for High Panthers, is more the main hoop we normally have to jump through is whether we have the resources and the money lah. Because it's not a business, right? So there's boli one.
Correct. Yeah. And in terms of how did you? I'm sure along the way you've grown larger and larger. It can't possibly be just a few people managing it. How did you decide who would be the next line of people to also help to manage and be the leaders or facilitators of the group?
So with High Panthers, it's quite interesting. Like I said, we never knew that all these other communities out there. And then like only as recent as a few years ago, like I said, we've been running for 8 years, right? This maybe like 2-3 years ago that we met other running crews around the world, and then we found out that they also had captains. I was like, what? Wow, why didn't I think of this before? Like, I'm a captain for AR. I don't know why I don't think to apply the same thought process to High Panthers. So for like a good 6 or 7 years, we're just doing it on our own, and honestly, it's very time consuming. So we started implementing a captaincy system, but like at the end of the day, it's also a bit hard because for AR, like I said, at the end of the day, like there's a brand. There are certain reasons why people want to be involved with the brand that you might not have as a independent running community. So, and obviously we're not paying people a salary, so sometimes it gets a bit tricky when we try to push certain things through or put people into certain positions, and then then when you need to get things done and you need to push a bit, it's a bit not so easy.
Mm.
But still, we're still trying to learn on that. I'll figure our way out with that. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to. It comes down to again the definition of community, lah. Like I think if you have people who are like-minded and on board and have the same agenda, then you're lucky, and then that will kind of work out. If you don't, then it's just ongoing. Oh, it's just ongoing thing, lah. That's what I
Any
feel.
any rules that that you've actually learned along the way that you put in place, right, to make the job easier? So I would see what this group that you have as High Panthers is more of a volunteer sort of activity, right? It's very similar to community service kind of volunteering, like let's say volunteering in the one room HDB flats, managing a group of volunteers for one room HDB flats for the old elderly, right? That's also managing that group. And then even if you put in a place of committee members to be responsible for certain things, but that's not their job, right? They don't receive a salary or even an allowance for it. So it's difficult to put to get them to do it if, let's say, work takes precedence over the community work, right? So yeah, any like guidelines that you put in place, like 5 questions to ask or 10 things that need to be that need to be assessed, to make sure that let's say somebody else, wants to come out and do their own community, which is non-profit driven, like the ones that you have, where should they or how should they begin?
Wow, it's all quite tough.
I think, right, that people are like very important
Okay.
because our struggle also with finding like a next succession, right, in this sense is if they don't believe in what the community is doing or the founders of the community are trying to build, then it will always come across as I'm doing this for this person, or yeah, sure, it's at my convenience, right? It's different when it's your own thing, right? It's very different when there's an ownership and it's yours. Like, I mean, it's like if I plant this plant and I planted this plant, I want this plant to grow, versus a person give me a plant. I'll be like, oh, okay, here's a plant. And then it dies, right? In most cases for me, it happens lah. Because I'm very bad with plants. But anyway, so I think it really depends on the people. I don't feel that there are guidelines per se, but I think it goes back down to having same goals, right? In that sense.
Yeah, how vested people are in the goals and the agenda of the community.
Yeah.
Lah. So I mean, a lot of times people also it's easy, right? If there are lower hurdles that they have to jump over, then it's not so difficult. Like they say, oh, I can just rock up and this community is there for me and whatever, then that's easy. But then once things get a bit harder, when there's certain things to be done or that, then people might back off. And sometimes it's also a bit tricky. It's the same thing when you talk about like the helping out with the old folks in our elderly home. You get a lot of people who, I mean, this is something that also when we do our work with High Panthers, and sometimes people say, hey, why don't we go and start volunteering in this home? And I always tell people, okay, we can, but the way I see it is that unless you choose to commit to this thing and you want to volunteer for like weekly for a period of time, your desire to go in one time now is going to only serve the purpose of making you feel like you've done something, so you feel good, but everybody in this place has to revolve their SOP and the operations around to accommodate you for this one day. So actually it's not helping you, making it more difficult for them. Except so the only person that comes out of this feeling good is you yourself. So
True.
yeah, so likewise with what you're saying, and in this case, I feel that that's the case of like often people have this good intention and they have this idea that, hey, I want to do this thing. But then when it starts to get a bit difficult or there are opinions that kind of clash, it happens with any organization or anywhere, anywhere it happens, even in the household, in the family. Then sometimes people don't like to have to deal with that stuff. Maybe it's like I'm not being paid, so why should I deal with this? Or you know,
It's like wasting my time.
yeah, I mean, for whatever reason lah. So if your
Yeah.
motivation to stay in it is not enough, then I think that's where it gets a bit hard. So for in a corporate setting, then you're getting paid lah, right? So you no choice. Otherwise, you leave the job. And a family setting also no choice because you were born into a family, right? So, but with a setting like that, then what are the ties that then hold you together to stay committed to these things? I guess then that comes down to individuals, law, and whether or not you really feel that identity with the community. And if you don't, then you don't lah. I don't think there's anything they can really do to enforce it. I think it's quite hard. And I think there's something that most that run crews around the world generally will face also lah. So like for me, I've accepted it a long time ago. I kind of figured that, you know what, if one day if there's really nobody who wants to take it on, and basically like it just stops, then so be it lah. We just move on to the next thing. It's not, you know, we can't hold on to it and say, oh, this is something that we built and it's now fading and wilting as a flower, and I feel very upset about it, blah blah. I think that everything has its time and place, and if it's now is the time to move on, then it's time to move on lah. But we do what we can now, and we provide a platform that we feel that we will enjoy and we want to share with people. And if there are people who enjoy it, they will come. If there's nobody who enjoys it, then it's just 5 people. Then even then, so be it. Yeah.
And Sophie, I really like the word you use, ownership, right? So so the word that you said was ownership, and you really defined it a lot better with the fact of alignment, you know, values, and it's the people, right, that you actually who are aligned with where you want to be, or who you are as a community, or what you are as a community, and to have that succession, right? And I mean, let's talk a little bit also about growth, right? I mean, 8 years is a long time, right? And I'm sure the community is quite big at the moment. Is there a measure on community? Is there I mean, I know it's growing organically, but is there any way that you measure how strong your community is, or how engaged your community is? Has that ever been a point of discussion?
I think it's never been something that, sorry, I speak for this. I don't think it's something that he verbalizes, like, oh, the community, like, okay, this is how it has grown. But I mean, okay, numbers for sure, right? It has grown, because when it started, it was 3 of them. Now we have like 60, mixture of more active, not so active, but still grown. I think for me, the way I see it, the measure for something like this that we're doing would be maybe an impact on or an influence on people outside of our community. So for example, this is a bit more tangible, right? Because you want to know what the impact is on what you're doing. So for example, we during the circuit breaker, we actually ran 2 campaigns under High Panthers to push out virtual runs, because we were cracking on our brains as to how to engage our communities when we cannot meet and run, right? Essentially, meeting and run is kind of like how it's always been. So we did 2. One was to actually one was focused on raising funds, where we brought in a corporate sponsor and we got people to run heart routes, like hearts, and we put, as in like the X number of hearts collected, we actually donated. The corporate sponsor donated money lah for every heart that was run. So I mean, huge idea was essentially about okay, can
Yeah, I show you. We mapped out all the hearts onto this thing.
Oh yeah, wow.
So all the hearts that everyone submitted, right? Ended up being mapped out onto
the Singapore map.
I zoom in for you there. So these are all individual hearts, and they're like more or less like quite true to where they are. So like
East.
if it's Holland V, you'll see it around the Holland V area. It's quite like it's true as humanly possible to have mapped out the 400 plus hearts lah, basically.
So that was obviously more charity focused as well, right?
And that was also to show that even though we are like living apart in Singapore, we're only allowed to run in our neighborhood at the time, right? That actually, you know, it's like solidarity thing lah. We're running all over apart, but actually when it comes down to it, we're actually a lot closer than we think we are. Yeah.
So that was very charity driven, and it was really quite amazing, because we had 476 hearts in total, I think, after a month, and a lot of it were people that were not part of our community as well. So to me, that would be a measure of the impact and influence of how the community has impacted other people outside of our community, right? And then when the next month, when June, was it June? June happened, May happened. Um, we were like, okay, we need to engage the community again because the heart challenge was great, but now what do we do, right? So then one of our captains, Eugene, came up with,
Not me.
not him, another Eugene, had this idea of basically getting people to run in their zones. So we divided Singapore into north, south, slash central, east, and west. And it was a campaign that we were unsure as to whether it will kick off, because you don't know whether people really want to copy each other, you know, across, like, do I really care that you stay in the east or that I stay in the in central? Honestly, I don't, but apparently it did matter to people. And they became very competitive, and I think Huge was a bit concerned, like, oh, should we have a charity angle to it, like what's the purpose of doing it? So at that point in time I said, you know, like, I remember I said this, that it doesn't matter that this challenge didn't have a charity element, but it was really about building our community, because we wanted to engage everyone and as many people as possible, even those outside of our community. And it worked. In that sense, it worked really well, and it became super competitive, and suddenly, like, other run crews were also running and competing lah. It was very heartwarming to see. And so, to answer your question, even though my answer is very long-winded, to answer your question, I feel that these would be the things that would measure how a community is successful, in a sense, for me, in this case lah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just like to add that I think I contributed 20 kilometers to the east side.
See?
East side, best side, bro.
Yeah.
Yes.
For me, the measurement is a lot more simple. I think that, I mean, for this entity, it's obviously not commercial. I think if you're a business and you need to, there's a commercial angle to it, then obviously you need a lot more measurable, more tangible metrics lah. If you want to talk about community engagement, because that directly impacts your business, right? But for us, I think that when something like this, where it's a lot more intangible and a lot more social movement, then for me, the measure of it is always whenever somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you know, like, what you guys did or what you guys said had really impacted something in their lives. And whenever one person, all it takes is one person to say that to me, or they've changed that, they've attempted some challenge, or they've done something different, but it's stemming from what we did. To me, that's a measure of success. And you know, basically that's enough. Like, whenever someone says that to me, I'll message her, or I'll tell someone, I'll be like, wow, you know, this is always, like, no matter how hard sometimes things get, all you need is this one person. It reminds me why we do these things lah.
Yeah, you already answered the question that I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, no, not on my list, right? Based on what we've been talking about, I was going to ask. No, I was going to ask you, so what exactly drives you guys to keep doing this? Because it is first of all, it's no commercial gain, right? Second of all, not a direct relevance to the work that you do on a branding perspective, or from a branding of your agency plus branding of yourself perspective, right? So then why are you doing it, right? So you answered it lah, right? Which is, you know, because you keep doing this, or you keep wanting to do this because you want to be able to benefit people, or someone to be able to take something out of the challenge, or take something out of being involved in the community. And that's exactly what drives both of you to keep pushing, right, the boundaries, and keep coming up with new things, keep coming up with new challenges. And yeah, I really love that. Yeah. And
unfortunately, that means I'm not going to be able to afford the Lamborghini lah.
I buy you small one, okay?
Yeah. Actually, coincidentally, literally just this afternoon, like, one of my friends was messaging. Actually, no, you know what? It's one of the co-founders of High Panthers. It was, funnily enough, and we just somehow, I can't remember what we're talking about like dressing, and normally how people like do like Gina, they are the ones who have money. Then so I was telling him that no, I look like Gina, but I got no money. Then he said, you just need to start monetizing all the things that you do, then can. Then I was like thinking, I was like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. Yeah, coincidentally, that's quite interesting that came up.
But you know, with that mindset, right, and that thought on why you guys do what you do, would you then say that the people within the community are also having that same sort of mindset, or you want them to also have that same sort of mindset? Is that something that you are secretly hoping for, or you already know is happening, or
I think you hope for it because at the end of the
mm,
day, like we say, with the community, then you want to talk about ownership, then you require the same kind of mindset. But there's obviously always different agendas as to why people join the community,
mm,
right?
mm,
For example, with AR, because it's a brand, so maybe you want to be affiliated with the brand, or
Mm.
they want like the AR shirt, for example, right?
mm, mm,
I don't think we're ever in a place to position to judge and say, oh, this you are right for your reason to wanting to join this community or not. But obviously, in terms of where we are looking at, then there's more desirability, or we rather when people are on board the same page lah. Because then it comes back to the same discussion we had earlier, right? In terms of like being on the same page, aligned, then you have the ownership, and it's easier to get things done as opposed to when there's certain problems. Then yeah, so that I guess that, but I think it's inevitable lah.
mm, mm, mm. And you mentioned that High Panthers started out with 3, and then now you've got 60, right? Out of these 60, how many would you say is they've been there for the years throughout, and attrition rate and all that? Would you have some rough numbers?
Active maybe 20.
Active like coming for runs
Mm,
So it's also one of the things like trying to manage the community. I mean, we put all the info on the socials. We also have a WhatsApp group chat, but then sometimes we also like try. So it's another thing we try to balance out. Like with the WhatsApp group chat, sometimes we be like worried about people who cannot spam. Because
mm,
sometimes really like when people start getting excited about something, the chat can suddenly like 100 plus messages. Then I'm also like, what's going on? So they worry about people getting spam. But then at the same time, you have people who want to be a part of it. They want to find out that they want to be in the know for certain things, but yet they don't want to commit to running every Sunday for different reasons lah. So that's where it gets a bit tricky, because then you kind of how do you can't also really how do is it right for us to then also quantify and say that this is what defines you as a so-called member.
mm,
So then with AR, obviously you come for now 5 months, you get an AR shirt. So those are the kind of things that get a bit tricky lah, that we over the years have been trying to navigate through and
mm,
figure out. Yeah, but
I mean, because also we are a like non-profit, right, for High Panthers, and when like if we have sponsors that support us for certain things that we do, we're also quite mindful that it's not being abused. I think those are one of the things that happens, right, within the community that we have. We don't know whether people are there, for example, if they want free things, or they want benefits. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? There are people that join certain things because they want the free benefits and the privileges. So, I mean, we're quite conscious of it also, because we don't want to kind of like end up being a space or a group where people know they can get free things and they come and just join us.
mm, mm,
So we try to implement certain, I guess, measures in the sense like, we would require that, they maybe attend a certain number of runs, or at least was active in the half a year or the year, to at least allow them to still be part of the community. I mean, it was quite difficult. I remember when we initially wanted to implement some kind of measure, because you don't want to appear like you are some like organization that is almighty and having all these like rules and restrictions, right? Because we're very very chill as a run group. We don't even like run by pace. We run by time. We welcome anyone. So we don't want to kind of like become that way. But I think we also need to protect the people that are vested in what we do, and also to respect the partners and sponsors that support us. So I think that kind of measure we also put into place lah. I mean, we want to be realistic about it, right? When we're sharing with you as well, and anyone who wants to know it, that it's not like all like fancy daisy happy, with doing something like that. There are days when he tells me like, why are we doing this? Like, or like I tell him, why are we doing this? These people are being so painful, right? Like, yeah. And I mean, there are days, it's like he said just now, when you get a message or someone comments and goes like, oh, thank you for doing this, or you've inspired me to like run like 3 km or whatever. I think that always makes it okay. But there are days where it's very hard and it's very unrewarding, and it's very, yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. It's that's how it's been now. Yeah.
Yeah, I really really appreciate, you know, the work that you guys do for community. And I mean, it's similar, slightly similar to what I do with Kampong Collective, which I invited you guys to join, right? So you guys are obviously community builders, and this Kampong Collective is a community for community builders. So community builders who've got challenges, and this is a platform for, and of course a lot of the people are in spaces or jobs that require them to do or build and engage community. So there's a commercial element to it. But at the same time, there are also a lot of people that are in social services. So it's a good mix of profit, non-profit, government, you know, private, public sector. So yeah, it's also, but we are not so gung ho like you guys, and you know, have weekly activities, you know, to really get the people going. But yeah, I can totally understand where you're coming from when you need to be juggling so many other things, and this is on top of the fact of your the role or the job that you have to do, right, which is your bread and butter. Yeah, so yeah, you know, hats off to you guys, to those men. Yeah, and maybe we can end, right, by you sharing any tips lah for somebody just who's looking to maybe start his own run group, or maybe he's got some idea to do his own special interest group, which is really community driven, not profit driven. And you know, and you guys, you know, High Panthers is, you know, 8 years, AR is 3 years. What would be the things that he or she should be looking out for, right? Blind spots lah, yeah, and for the community to be kicking off on the right note.
I think comes back down to, and this is something that I also like learn over the years. I think coming back down to being clear as to what you want. I mean, like I said, the messaging and all that, the, you know, the nice copywriting and the verbiage on that will change over the years. But I think at the start of it, the core purpose as to why you're doing it or what you want to achieve out of it should not waver. So while the messaging that we put out for High Panthers over the years has changed, I look back at it now and I think, oh, actually, nothing has really changed that much. And from there, then once you have a good grasp on that, I think then the rest of it kind of falls into place. I think also being able to, or this is another important part, I think being able to have thick enough skin. Because at the end of the day, like I say, you want to do something like that, then you know, if you're going to do it with so the bigger the group, the more problems you're going to have. Long story short. So if you want to do something of your own with a smaller group, then it's easier to manage. You want to do something with a bigger group, then obviously you got more headaches, more politics, and that's just something you have to, yeah. I guess people don't really, it's sort of a blind spot. It's like an obvious blind spot. Like, it's there, everyone knows, but no one really thinks about it until it happens, kind of thing, yeah.
And also knowing what size you want to grow it to, that's also a little bit of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, but to be honest, even for us also right now, I don't really have a fixed agenda or fixed number. Like, if it goes up, if it somehow hits like 200 people, then we'll deal with it as it comes along. If half the people fall out now and say that, you know, we don't like what we don't buy into this anymore, and we're down to like 30 people, or even we're down to 5 people, I think, you know, as long as those that whatever the number of people are that feel there's a benefit to it, then so be it lah.
And I like what you said also earlier, when, you know, you're prepared that, you know, if somewhere down the road nobody is willing to take ownership of it, then you just, you know, it dies a natural death, and you know, you close it lah. So it's like 拿得起放得下, right? That kind of concept. So don't beat yourself over it, and but if you really feel for something and you want to get it going, then, you know, just do it lah. I mean, there's no reason, no harm lah in starting what you feel really passionate about.
Actually, I like that you brought it up. I feel that quite often, maybe it's a byproduct of our system in Singapore, and something that, you know, I also never really kind of really accepted. I think that willingness to just do and fail, I think it's a byproduct of our system here, that we don't like that. I mean, I guess nobody in life really likes failing now, wherever you're from, but especially here, we are so afraid of that apparent failure, or that apparent like judgment from other people.
It's
don't know which one's harmful.
it's a ego thing. Like, I think there's a bit of an ego to all of that as well, right? So one is judgment,
Maybe
societal failure, and ego along.
yeah,
But the
kind of all
ego
ties in
comes,
together.
yeah, the ego comes from the fact that we've been brought up that way, right? In such that, it's how people
Yeah.
perceive and
So
view
when I
others.
had to learn to accept this part, then for like say for example for the high panthers, right? Then you kind of just need to be able to accept yourself that oh okay one day it really dies. What's the worst case scenario? People like ask you to your face like, hey, what happened to it? Then you just like, oh, like that long. Or if people like gossip behind your back and like, hey, you know, this thing that happened, then you also just like, okay, like that. And once you can accept that, actually, then it's really just okay, lah. Like actually, you never put any money into it. There's no investment. Like actually, there's nothing. It's just,
Yeah.
and then even if I say that, oh, but the last 8 years was wasted, actually not really also because I learned a lot from it, and so yeah lah. So I guess the acceptance is a very that's why I said it's a good point that you brought it up. Maybe that's the real blind spot that people should know.
Probably that too. So I will add that into the article.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe
Sophie, any last words, on specific to community building?
I think for me, this is like across anything, right? Whether it's the business or whether it's the communities I'm in. I think for me lah, okay, do everything with heart. Because if you don't, then basically there's no point lah at all. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks so much for your time. And
Thanks.
it's been really nice catching up with you guys.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, likewise.
It's been so long.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
I'm gonna stop the recording.